Jefferson County Historical Society. This is the railroad station, and it was built in 1895. I am John White, and I'll be your tour for today. But let's go back several hundred thousand years and take a look at Madison's geography. At one time, the Ohio Valley did not exist, nor did the Ohio River. It was right straight across. There was a small river here, but it was not the Ohio River. As you came into town, you saw rocks on both sides of the road, and that is the bottom of an ancient ocean, and it's full of fossils. And the ocean was salt water. But they do have a difficult time finding fish fossils. They are found occasionally. And I talked to some professors at Hanover College, and some thought they may not evolve that well at that time. And then we went to two ice ages, and the last one was 14,000 years ago. And when it melted, it carved this valley out. Since the small rivers here, there was an incline, and it was ideal for the ice to melt here. Well, let's go back now the railroad started. The governor wanted a railroad to run from Michigan to Jeffersonville, and that's where it should have run. But we were the largest city, and we had the political power, and we got it. And we should not have had it on account of that hill. We started building the railroad in 1836, and it reached Indianapolis in 1847. And once they had it completed, to get up the hill, each car had to be pulled up by a team of horses. And they freewheeled down, and some of them had better brakes than others. On one occasion, somebody cut loose a flat car loaded with firewood, and it ran through a passenger car and killed 20-some people. Several people have died on that road. Well, following pulling them up by horse, they had a cog railroad, and it was homemade engine made here in Jefferson County. And it did very well, except when the spring broke holding the cog wheel down, the engine had come back downtown big time and everybody jumped off. And I sincerely hope there wasn't a passenger car that is pulling up. Then they got the Reuben wells, and that worked successfully. It would drop sand on the track if the humidity started picking up. But if it was raining, they had to drop the sand continuously. That engine may be seen today in Indianapolis at the Children's Museum at 30th and Meridian Street. It's in mint condition. What did they haul in here? Well, they hauled corn to make starch, the type of starch you would use in laundry, which nobody uses any longer because we have wrinkle-free clothing. Now, they also hauled in wheat to make flour, and big time what they hauled in here was hogs. We had 6 slaughterhouses downtown. You could smell Madison before you got to it. And 2 of them were along the river, and they were throwing heads, lungs, and intestines in the river. And if it didn't move, it just laid there and got ripe. They even had hog drives down Main Street instead of cattle drives. And then when they shipped that out of here, it was not refrigerated. It'd be in a 55-gallon barrel, salt pork. They also made iron stoves here, and they made furniture, and they even made steamboats. We were a very industrialized community. Well, let's take a look around in here. Railroad time. When they started building this railroad up to the early 1900s, 12 noon was whenever the sun was directly over top you. Well, 200 to 300 miles down the track, it wasn't over top them. Now you figure out how you're going to make out a schedule. And they had some accidents. So the railroad companies went to Congress and established the time zones that we are presently on. And it worked out very well. The clock that we have here is the original clock when the station was open. And it runs very well. It just needs to be wound today, and I'm not the man that winds it. The ticket window has a bullet hole. It was not a robbery. We think the night watchman was playing with his pistol. And if you look in the hallway, there are a set of lights and 2 up, 2 down. That's 2 gas, 2 electric. They made gas and electricity in this town in the 1880s, and they also had telephones. The bell came out of an old station down on the riverfront, and it has a crack in it. And it says the guy was ringing, and he was distracted and he pulled it 360 degrees. I think that may be a lie, because you don't accidentally pull a bell that large, 360. I think he may have been showing off and told that story to save his job. And if you were here when this station was open, this would be full of cigar smoke. And the women would go into this side room to avoid the smoke, and their restrooms were flush toilets, quite modern for the time. And we did not have a potbelly stove in here. We had a furnace in the basement, and that was the central heat in those days. We were quite advanced. Now, we had a flood in 1937. It rained for 2 weeks. That didn't cause the flood. It melted the snow in the Appalachian Mountains, and that caused the flood. And the water came a foot above the bottom of these windows. That's a lot of water. Now, if you were here prior to 1929, and it hadn't rained much, in the summertime, you could wade the river. You'd get wet, but you could wade it. And that's why animals came here. The buffaloes came here. Indians came here across the river. It was a safe place to go. In 1929, though, they built a dam at Louisville and raised the water 9 feet here. And they built a Madison dike. And it runs about 300 feet south of the bridge towards Madison, but curves to the south, downstream, and forces the water to one side so the boats can get through in a very shallow area. We did have one occasion where a man was piloting a boat, city of Madison, and he was from Madison. And I don't know what he was thinking about, but he ran into it and sank his boat. And if anybody knew it was there, he should have. Well, we will take a look around on the other side and see old Madison prior to the flood. These posters here are not copies, they are the real thing. But my favorite poster is the one to the Indiana State Fair. And if you'll note, the fair started on October 5, not August. The fair used to be primarily for farmers to see new equipment. Now we're more interested in teenagers spending their money. Now looking here at the end, we see how the station, the railroad cars are out in front. There's 2 tracks, and they backed in here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they backed in?
They backed in. And if you notice, this is a bus, and it'd deliver you about town, but it would not go uptown, up on a hill, to make any deliveries because there's not hardly anybody living up there.
Oh.
Now, if you'll notice the dress of the people, they appear like most of them have some money in their pocket. I see 2 people in there that appear to be rather poor. It cost you $2.50 to go to Indianapolis on the railroad. And if you lived in Louisville or Cincinnati, you had to take a boat to Madison, and it cost you $1.50. And we had very good business until Jeffersonville and Cincinnati built a rail to Indianapolis. And it basically killed our passenger business. Now we'll step in the office here. We have more gas electric lights. And look at that old-fashioned typewriter. That's the fan. Now that is a 4-bladed fan, and if you happen to have a 5 or 6 blade, it is a collector's item, but still not of too much great value. And then I want to bring your attention to the desk to the right. And if you look at the handwriting of that letter, and that was done with a straight pen, the type that you dip in an inkwell. I have used them and found many times about the time I completed my letter, I dropped a spot of ink on the paper. Wasn't very good. And then we have a telegraph key there, where our visitors may press on the telegraph key.
Oh. Oop. Okay, send the okay.
And we have a phone over here on the wall, and it has a crank, and that's attached to a magneto. And in the old days, most of the operators' exchanges were in private residence, and people slept beside their phone, and they were not very pleased when you called late at night. My father says, do not call your grandfather too late, you'll make the operator mad. And as many people call and talk for an hour just talking about nothing, in those days the operator would probably unplug you. And they were excellent information to police officers because they knew everything going on in the community. This steam engine does not even have a headlight on it, but it does have a whistle. And the governor's on board. And a U.S. Senator, Jesse H. Bright, is on board. So you know everybody's dressed up. And that engine's putting hot ash out on her clothes, burning her clothes.
And we borrowed that from Louisville?
Yes, they brought up here with a barge and oxen pulled it up the road to get to the top of the hill. Yeah. Now Senator Bright resided in Madison. Now keep in mind, prior to and during the Civil War, it was legal to have slaves in Kentucky. Many of our wealthy citizens owned farms in Kentucky and owned slaves. And Senator Bright was one of those parties. He made a serious mistake by writing a letter to Jefferson Davis recommending a man be promoted to general in the Confederacy. The letter was intercepted by the Union Army and it was sent to Washington, and Mr. Bright was kicked out of the Senate. He's very fortunate he didn't get his neck stretched. Now the Union Army would put you in front of a firing squad pretty fast. For one reason, when you enlisted, you got a bonus of $300. To many people, that was an annual income. Well, you hang around 6 months and go to another state and do the same thing again. That will get you a firing squad.
Oh, gosh.
Now, one of those holes full of black powder did not go off when they was cutting their ravine up the hill. And the guy took his rod, steel rod, he should have poured water on the hole, but he didn't, and it caused a spark and blew the rod into his skull. However, he survived it and went back to work and died a year later from typhoid fever. Now, what that is not telling you is at that time, they were pumping water out of the Ohio River to your home untreated. You were drinking everything that Cincinnati and Pittsburgh was putting in it. Now, looking behind here, show you the cuts in the hill. That's fresh. And I find something very interesting in that picture. Look at that little girl there.
Oh, I didn't notice.
Long dress on, you know she has dainty feminine shoes, but she wanted to get up that hill because those boys are there. She's a tomboy. Now, today, you would have a tractor going there with a hydraulic scoop picking up those broken pieces of rock and dropping it over the side. In those days, they did not have that, and they had a thing called a slip scoop. And it's nothing but a monster shovel with two handles on it, pulled by a team of horses. And you'd pick up the handles as a scoop up the gravel or the crushed stone or whatever, fill it full, drop it, stand on the handles so the front end tilts up so it won't collect anymore, and drive it where you want. However, the horses don't want to go over the cliff. You have to unhook it and scoot it yourself over the cliff. And that is quite a task. This is a model of the hill and part of downtown Madison. Now this is an electric train, so actually the track stopped in front or near the front of the railroad station here. There was also a set of tracks that came straight down and ran along the riverfront for local industry and stopped about here. This large building here, it's 1885, and it was a cotton mill. They hauled cotton in here. Now the railroad was built by the Irish, and the only Catholic church in town at that time was German Catholic, and frequently had services in German. So the Irish built themselves one called St. Michael's, and it's still standing but no longer a functioning church. If you go coming in town from the west on State Road 56 and go over the bridge, you've gone over the hill. And as you're coming in town and get past the power plant, you will see a golf course. The clubhouse at one time was the second largest Army hospital during the Civil War, and Grant was here to inspect it. And we have State Road 7, and we have Hanging Rock Hill, quite well known for that. But when we have a torrential downpour, that becomes Niagara Falls, and they have to shut that road down or to wash their cars over the side. And if you'll notice, there's no trees because they had cut them to be burnt. They were hauling wood in here by rail, and that steep hill has been quite a problem. When they first started, they had a passenger car coming down, and somebody cut a car load of firewood loose, and it caught up with it and ran through it and killed about 20 people. All right, in a small closet, we have a thing called a car mover. It is still used today. I have 3 or 4 men every year tell me they use it. Use it where you would want to move up a freight car, maybe 20 feet or so, to unload it. It's too expensive to call an engine in to move it, and this works very well. They have no problem at it. Now, looking over here on the board, prior to air brakes, each caboose carried 2 brakemen and a conductor. And when you had to stop, those brakemen had to crawl on top of the caboose and jump from car to car and manually set the brakes. If it had snow or ice on it, or tree limb hit you, it could be a high adventure. Nationwide, they lost about 1,000 brakemen a year falling off and being killed. The cars had to be hooked up, and they lost fingers, hands, arms, and were crushed occasionally. And they had a very bad feature. They become disconnected. And if you're going down up a hill and you're in the disconnected part, you'd better be figuring out how to get on top of that car and set the brakes, or you're about to die. And then we have an accident up there, and we have a wooden passenger car with a coal stove vent. And you had accidents in the wintertime, you had a fire. And wooden passenger cars telescoped each other, just killed everybody in front of them. Metal cars didn't. They knew that, but they didn't want to spend the money for it. Up to 1918, they was losing about 10,000 passengers a year. They finally converted to first and second class tickets. Second class was wood car, first class was steel car. Then they went totally steel. Then we have a steam engine there. I'm glad they're gone. They start grass fires and forest fires. If you're in a passenger car behind it, you have to have your windows up because hot ash is blowing in on you. And if that thing gets low on water, it'll blow up like it's full of dynamite. In fact, they'd probably tear the side of this building out and maybe kill us in here. Now over here we have a group of men out working on the track. In my day, I've seen many of these men out working. You don't see it anymore. It's automated. But they called them Gandhi dancers. And why they called them that, they sang to do things in rhythm with each other. And down here we have a hand cart. But we had an evangelist come to town, and he got done preaching. He wanted some excitement. So one of the railroaders brought him down the hill on that. And it's my understanding he prayed most of the way. Now these cross ties are white oak, and they're very hard. They are slowly converting these to concrete. And they have clips for the rails to fit in. So thus the correct distance between the two rails is quite consistent. And today that's very important because the new engines and their complete cars are using only the width of a dime of the rail. In fact, this rail is an old rail and it's not angled at all. The new ones are angled and the wheels are angled and they fit better that way. Then we obtained a coal burner, but it also had to drop sand on the track. And then we went to 2 diesels and they'd run together, and rarely did they have to drop sand since they were running together.
What does it mean, drop sand?
The trains have to drop sand on the track.
Oh, the wheels would slip due to the moisture, and sand made it grip so the wheels can take hold and go up.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like you walking on ice, but you spread a little sand on it. It's a baggage room, and we have a bell over here off of an old train, engine rather, and if the children want to ring it, they may ring it if the parents can stand the loud noise of it. All right, when they started building this railroad in the United States, no steel company was making a T-type rail. That's the rail that you know of today. And we had to buy our T-type rails from England, and that's quite expensive to get it shipped over here. So we only used it for 28 miles. But they can make a strap rail in this country, and this is a strap rail. It's nothing more than a strapped piece of steel. The problem is, in the heat of summer, it will ski up on you and buckle. And if you don't catch it and get out a sledgehammer and put it down, of course, it'll derail you. We used this until 1857. Some railroads used it until 1865. The railroad was built by the Irish with a few Germans, and they were paid 50 cents a day on a 10-hour day. And to get the best Irish help, they allocated 8 jiggers of whiskey a day per man. My question is, how big was the jiggers? I hope they didn't drink it all once. If you notice, the men in that picture all have long sleeve shirts on. They did not make short sleeve shirts in those days. And you have so poor that you had to wear your shirt the year around. Now, if you go out to Cliffy Falls Park, there are 2 caves out there, man-made caves we have here. It's going to go up along the creek bed of this railroad. It had been a less steep incline and through those caves, but they went bankrupt. Mr. Bro bought 5 paddle wheel boats, and they all went bankrupt. And in fact, the entire railroad went bankrupt. He did do a couple of very outstanding things though. His predecessor would hold a train for wealthy people if they was running late. He says she's leaving at 10:30, and that's when they left, when he took over. And he also helped organize the main train station in Indianapolis, which was quite an accomplishment. Now, if we look back here on this chart, we have 2 engines. Notice the different size of wheels. The one to your right has very small wheels. That is the MG Bright. Same thing as the Reuben Wells. And it did nothing but run up and down the hill all day. If there was no humidity, it would not have to drop sand, but if humidity picked up, they would be dropping sand.
Which one was the Hill engine?
The one to the right.
Okay.
And the engine to the left would take you to Indianapolis. They could get over the hill, but couldn't get up the hill. And look at the size of the wheels. That's for speed. Prior to 1974, actually it's a little bit before that, this station here was wiped out by a tornado. And if you'll notice, gargle there and one there. And we have them here.
Why would they get bottles of whiskey with it?
They were jiggers. Jiggers are about this big, small glass. And the Irish are pretty good drinkers. And it was just to keep them employed and not go somewhere else to go to work. And sort of a reward for them.
Oh.
A reward or a bribe, I don't know.
Maybe both. I've been to Ireland twice. And if you want to know anything, you go to the pubs. They're sort of a social center. They're rather quiet. Children are permitted to be in there as late as 10 o'clock at night. So it's different from our taverns.
Yay! That's perfect. Can you say hello?
Hello.
Did you know you're standing where there used to be an old railroad station?
Yes.
It used to be the passenger and freight station of the old Madison Railroad. And after the 1937 flood, they tore it down
Why is that?
because it was covered with water and it ruined it
How did it ruin it?
by being underwater. Where were you born, John?
Shelby County, Indiana, a little town called Marietta, and born at home.
Oh my goodness. But you were spent a lot of time at the girls' school in Indianapolis.
I spent from 1934 till 1957 there. I was 24 years old when I left and moved in there when I was 1.
Your dad was, what was he, a
He was
caretaker?
the farm superintendent,
Oh, okay.
and my mother was over the house mothers.
But did it seem like the school was out in the country in those days?
It was partially out in the country. It was out, not in any city limits.
So what do you remember best about that, living there?
First of all, I was the only child there, and I made my own entertainment. And I played war a lot, and Indians and cowboys out in the wooded area. But what I remember most is riots, seeing my father get his wrist slit wide open with a razor blade by a girl. I had a girl take a swing at me with a pair of scissors one night. Unfortunately, I was a young man. My reverse transmission was very good. And I waded a ditch up to my chest to get to a guard that was down and having 5 girls beat him in the head with a glass pitcher, and I was only 18 then, and not an employee. I was just out helping the other guys and was involved in it.
What, is that how you decided to become a policeman?
I think it just naturally happened. Everything I saw. I also had a cousin that was chief deputy on Marion County, and he'd stop by and visit us in uniform and a police car and take me for a ride in it. And I was just a child then. But that had a great influence on me too. And the state police coming to the girls' school to put down riots and such things as that.
What year did you go into the Indiana police?
1953. I went in as a criminal records clerk. And once I had my pension taken out of my check, I got 2 checks a month and neither one amounted to $100. But I bought a new car, but I was living at home, and that made the difference.
Did the Indiana police furnish you with a car, or did you?
After you become trooper, you have a car.
Oh, I see.
You get a car.
Did they give you your gun, or did you
They
have?
provide everything except your socks and your underclothing. And a belt.
And then when did you retire?
1988. At the rank of lieutenant. And I was commander of the Sellersburg post.
What's the most famous case you remember working on?
The best thing I pulled out in my entire career. I had only been on a year and a half. And I was getting ready to go off duty. It's about 1:30 in the morning. And I was in Scottsburg, and I noticed an airplane flying over Scottsburg with its landing lights on. We don't have an airport.
That's true.
And I turned my spotlight up to him and flickered a couple times, and he flickered back at me. I turned on my red light so he knew I was a police car. And I come to the conclusion this guy was lost. And I called the post and wanted to know if there's any troopers in the area. And fortunately, the night patrol was within 20 minutes of me. So there were 3 of us, and we went out to an abandoned airport, and the grass was every bit of shoulder high. And one went to one end and one went to the other and lit it up. He took one pass at it, looked at it, circled, come back and put her down.
Good grief.
He had 30 minutes of gas left and no radio.
Oh my
And
heavens.
thought he was over Madison. And nobody got hurt, and the airplane didn't get damaged. They come out there and mowed it the next morning, and he took off.
Good grief. How did you know he needed help?
He shouldn't have been trying to land over Scottsburg.